I had been through enough medical inspections in my 11 years of service to know the difference between routine discomfort and the kind of silence that freezes a room. But nothing prepared me for the exact moment Major Elias Corbin jerked his hands back like he had just touched a live wire inside my body. The examination light hummed above me inside Womack Army Medical Center at Fort Liberty, its glare slicing across the metallic walls while I tried to breathe evenly and stay still the way any soldier would. But when the military gynecologist froze, truly froze, I felt a cold wave spread from my spine to the edges of my fingers. "Captain Hale, do you see this?" He whispered more to himself than to me, but his voice was unsteady, which was already wrong. Major Corbin was the type who did not stumble on words. He had been doing this for over 20 years, and I had seen him handle emergencies in the field hospital without blinking. I pushed up on my elbows, confused, irritated, trying to read his expression. "What is it, sir?" I asked, forcing my voice steady. He did not answer right away. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, squinting his eyes, and then pulled his stool back with a loud scrape across the tile. He peeled his gloves off quickly, as if whatever he had touched did not belong on human skin. "Captain, when was your last exam?" he asked. "6 months ago, sir, routine PHA, and no one else has examined you. No civilian clinics, no urgent care, no self-treatment, no experimental supplements, no unauthorized medication." His tone sharpened with each question. "No, sir, only standard issue-based medication." "Why?" He exhaled slowly and pointed one finger toward the covered tray to my right. "Sutton, there is a fluid inside you that should not exist in any human body. Thick, cloudy, pale yellow, but with a strange chemical scent. Not infection, not discharge, not gel, not anything that should be present in a woman your age or in anyone." My mouth dried instantly. I forced myself to breathe, but the air felt thick. "Sir, what are you saying?" That is when he asked the question that punched straight through my chest. "Has your stepfather been alone with you recently?" The words rattled around the examination room, bouncing off the metal cabinet's wires and sterile surfaces, before landing inside me with a force that almost knocked the air out of my lungs. My stepfather. Why him? Why now? Why would a military doctor with 2 decades of experience jump straight to that? I had not spoken to Earl Maddox in 9 years. I had not seen him since the day I packed my things at 22 and left Georgia without a backward look. "No, sir," I said slowly, choosing each word. "I have not been near him. I have not contacted him. I do not speak to him." Major Corbin did not relax. Instead, he stood up, walked to the corner, and hit the call button for urgent lab processing. His breathing was too controlled, too deliberate, which told me he had already drawn a conclusion he did not want to say out loud. "Captain Hale, this substance did not develop naturally. It was not created by your own system. Someone introduced it." He said the words gently, but they landed like blows. "Introduced. Inside me." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. I felt the faint tremor in my legs and forced them still. Soldiers do not shake. Soldiers do not panic. But the truth was carving itself into my skin like ice. Someone put something inside my body without my knowledge. And then he added one more line. "Captain, this type of substance is often used in cases of long-term medical interference. It is consistent with outside manipulation." The air left my lungs in a slow, tight stream. I could feel my pulse hammering under my jaw and in the palms of my hands. My thoughts were suddenly too loud, too fast, too sharp. Earl, no, impossible, absurd. But the moment I tried to dismiss the idea, a memory rose up like a ghost. A faint, bitter chemical smell on Earl's flannel shirt when I was 17. The same sharp synthetic odor he called vitamins, homemade supplements to make you stronger, Sutton. Trust me. Your mother trusted me. It was the kind of smell that lingered in the back of your throat for hours, the kind of smell I had not encountered since the day I left that house. Until today. Major Corbin returned to my side, slowly lowering his voice. "Sutton, something has been done to you. Whether recently or in the past, we have to find out. My vision blurred at the edges. The room tilted gently like the world was shifting under me. Shock does not slam into you all at once. It crawls up from the inside and steals warmth inch by inch. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to look straight at him. Sir, what exactly did you find? He hesitated, which scared me more than anything else could have. Captain Hale, I do not know yet, but I know this. Whatever is inside your body did not get there on its own, and until we confirm what it is and how long it has been there, you are not safe. Not medically, not physically, and not legally. A knock came at the door. Lab tech's ready. Major Corbin opened the door, then paused and looked back at me with a seriousness I will never forget. Sutton, I need you to be honest. Has anyone ever had access to your body, your medications, or your personal items without your consent? Anyone from your past? Anyone who believed they had the right to control you? That was when my breath finally broke, because the first name that rose inside me was the same one I had spent almost a decade trying to bury. Earl Maddox, my stepfather, trailing the same chemical scent I had just been told was now inside me. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely afraid. Something was wrong. Something had been wrong for a long time, and now the truth was rising right out of the darkness. For 6 months, I had been living inside a body that felt slightly off balance, like a machine running with one loose bolt rattling somewhere deep inside the engine. At first, I blamed the long field exercises. Then I blamed the humidity at Fort Liberty. Then the endless ruck marches. Then the change in sleep cycles. Anything except the possibility that something was fundamentally wrong with me. The first sign had been the sudden cramping that hit like a sharp, twisting cord just under my ribs. It came and went. I told myself it was dehydration. Then came the fatigue. Real fatigue. The kind that made my limbs feel thick and heavy even after 8 full hours of sleep. Noise started to bother me more. Light, too. I brushed it off as overtraining, but deep down I felt something shifting like a quiet signal trying to push through my stubbornness. The rash appeared next. Small red patches around my hips and lower stomach. They itched a little, but mostly they just looked angry. A medic in my unit suggested I go to the clinic, but I joked that it was probably the laundry detergent, anything to avoid getting checked. Then the mood swings started. Not dramatic ones, but enough to make my teammates raise an eyebrow. One moment fine, the next moment irritable over nothing. That was not me. I was known for staying composed even under pressure. One night, Specialist Torres looked at me across the barracks room and said, "Captain, you sure you are all right because you look like you are running on fumes." I forced a smile and promised her I would get checked next week. Then, next week became next month. Then next month became never. I had always been durable. Always the strong one who pushed through. Admitting something was wrong felt like betraying every instinct I had learned in uniform. But denial has a way of building walls around a problem until the shock comes tearing straight through them. That shock had come 20 minutes earlier when Major Corbin recoiled in horror inside the exam room. Even now, my skin prickled when I replayed it. Chemical scent. Thick, pale residue. Something introduced. The words echoed. The symptoms began to connect like scattered dots, forming a picture I had not wanted to see. My chest tightened. I focused my breathing the way they teach in stress training. In for 4 seconds. Hold for 2. Out for 6. But instead of calming me, the breaths only stirred up memories I had tried to bury. Earl Maddox. The name alone could chill a summer night. I had not spoken it aloud in 9 years, but it lived under my skin like an old scar. He had been 43 when he married my mother, a paramedic in rural Georgia, the kind of man who collected certificates and medical books in boxes stacked along the hallway. At first, he seemed attentive, too attentive, always diagnosing someone, always offering supplements and tinctures and tonics he mixed in the kitchen. Homemade remedies, he called them. Immune boosters, strength shots, pain reducers, energy balancers. If you said you felt tired, he had a bottle for it. If you said you felt stressed, he had a powder for that, too. My mother trusted him. She believed his talk about natural healing. She believed he helped her fight through the pain of her illness. She did not see how he started controlling everything: what she ate, what medications she took, what she told her doctors, what she told me. I was 19 when she died. After that, Earl claimed that I needed him, that I was fragile, that my body was weak just like hers. He repeated it so often I started doubting myself. He kept giving me pills. Colorful little capsules he said were vitamins. Liquid shots he prepared in vials. Sometimes they made me dizzy. Once, they made me collapse completely. The emergency room physician called it a hormone imbalance. Earl took that diagnosis and held it over me like a chain. He said I had to listen to him because he knew what my body needed. By 22, I could not take another minute in that house. I enlisted. I packed a duffel and left everything behind, including him. I changed my number, blocked every email, refused every letter. But he kept finding ways to reach me. A card slipped under my door during advanced training. A package arriving on base with no sender name. Clothes, vitamins, supplements, notes written in that clipped handwriting. You need to stay healthy. You are not built like other people. Once a small bottle of multivitamins showed up marked from Mom, even though she had been gone for years. I threw it away without opening it. I did not want to believe any of it had meaning. Not until today. The chemical smell in that exam room was the same one I remembered on Earl's shirt when he brewed his mixtures. The same scent that drifted from the kitchen when he told me to swallow another capsule. The same scent that clung to his hands when he pressed a cold cloth to my forehead after I fainted. The same scent buried in a memory I had tried to block. My breath shook slightly. I clenched my fists to stop the tremor. I could feel the outline of fear beginning to form, but I crushed it down hard. The door opened quickly and Major Corbin stepped back into the room holding a thin folder. His expression was darker than before, as if what he had just seen in the lab confirmed his worst suspicion. He moved closer and spoke quietly. "Captain Hale, whatever this is, it did not come from your own body. It was put inside you, introduced, not naturally produced." His words carved through me like a truth I could no longer deny. Major Corbin returned with the lab folder held flat against his palm, as if the paper itself carried something he did not want spilling into the air. He stood there for a moment, eyes locked on the page expression carved into the controlled neutrality that only seasoned military doctors mastered. But even through that mask I saw it. Concern, real concern, the kind that tightens the muscles around the eyes, the kind no professional training can entirely hide. "Captain Hale, we have your preliminary results," he said quietly. His tone made the small hairs on my arms rise. He took a breath before continuing. "Your hormone profile is not only abnormal, it is manipulated." The word hit harder than the exam room shock. Manipulated. Not imbalanced. Not stressed. Manipulated. He turned the page toward me and tapped a line with his pen. "Your cortisol is at a level I only see in soldiers suffering severe trauma or forced endocrine shifts, but you have not been through any event that would generate this naturally." I swallowed hard, feeling my throat constrict. "Sir, what does that mean?" He pointed to the next set of numbers. "Your estrogen is being blocked by something, artificially, and your progesterone is elevated far beyond what your cycle or age would explain. Elevated in a way that suggests deliberate interference." My stomach twisted. I felt the cold edge of fear slide beneath my ribs. "That is not all," he said, almost reluctantly. "We found traces of a synthetic hormone that is not used anywhere in Army medical inventory. Not in any approved treatment, not in any authorized medication on this base. Synthetic, off record, unauthorized." Every word was a blow. "Sir, how could something like that get into my system?" He hesitated before answering, which scared me more than any number on the page. Someone put it there, either through ingestion absorption or direct application, but Captain, the dispersal pattern suggests multiple exposures. Multiple. Plural. Not a single contaminated pill. Not a one-time accident. A pattern. A method. A plan. My pulse hammered against my ribs as I tried to keep my voice level. "What else did you find?" He turned to the final page. The substance inside your body contains an irritant compound that does not come from medication. It is similar to the chemical irritants used in some civilian lab settings. Not lethal, not fast-acting, but capable of causing chronic inflammation, tissue irritation, and long-term hormonal disruption. It is engineered to be slow, unnoticed, and persistent. My mouth went dry. The room felt smaller. He watched my face carefully. Captain Hale, this does not match any infection. It does not match any natural process. It does not match accidental contact. Everything points toward outside tampering. The word tampering fell between us like a weight. Sir, who would even do something like that? He looked at me with a seriousness that made my skin prickle. That is what we need to determine. So I have to ask you this again. He stepped closer. His voice lowered into a controlled tone. Captain, has anyone recently given you drinks, supplements, medication, lotion, gel, personal care items, or food? Anyone at all? My mind flashed through the last year. The deployment, the barracks, the mess hall, the training days, the packages, the small brown boxes that showed up with no return address, the things I had tossed aside without thinking. Then, the memory rose clear as a snapshot. The lotion. A small white bottle Earl had sent 3 months ago. He wrote that it was something my mother used to like. I had not used it often, but I had opened it. Got a faint chemical scent off it that made me wrinkle my nose. I told myself maybe it had expired. And then, the gummies. A bright pink container labeled Women's Vitamins. Sweet-smelling, innocent-looking. Earl had sent them in a box with a short note saying these were the ones your mother always wanted you to take. I never trusted anything he sent, but I kept the container out of guilt. I used them twice. 2 small doses. That was months ago. I felt the blood drain from my face. Sir, I said slowly, I received some items recently from someone in my past, someone I do not speak to anymore. He watched me carefully. Who? My stepfather, sir. He nodded once. I need the exact items. Do you still have them? I do. In my locker. I never threw them out. His jaw tightened slightly. Captain, this is important. Did you ever use them? Even once. Yes, sir. Twice. Maybe 3 times. He closed the folder and exhaled slowly. That might be enough. Enough to cause the symptoms. Enough to introduce the compound. Enough to explain the fluid he had seen. Enough to connect 9 years of distance back to the one man I wanted gone from my life forever. He moved closer, lowering his voice further. We ran one more comparison test. Something in your results stood out. The chemical irritant we found in the fluid matches a sample that was flagged in your medical history years ago. My heart stopped. Years ago? Captain Hale, did you send out a lab sample in 2014 during basic? Yes, sir. After I fainted. Why? He held my gaze steady. Because the irritant we found today is identical to the trace found in the blood panel you submitted in 2014, the year you left home, the year I left Earl. The room spun for a moment. Not metaphorically, literally. I gripped the edge of the exam table. 9 years. 9 years, and the same compound was still haunting my body, still tied to him, still following me like a shadow I never consented to carry. Major Corbin spoke again very quietly. Captain, this started long before today. Someone interfered with your body in the past, and whatever they did has resurfaced. My breath trembled through my teeth. The truth was no longer just a possibility. It had a shape, a scent, a signature, and now a date. 2014. The year I escaped him. The year he had already left something inside me without my knowledge. I used to think the worst year of my life was the year my mother died, but now sitting in that cold military clinic with tests piling up like accusations, I realized the worst year never really ended. It only went dormant, waiting to wake up again. My mother, Laura Hale, was the gentlest woman I have ever known. She fought stage 4 cancer with the quiet dignity only angels and nurses seem to have. When she became too weak to walk without trembling, Earl stepped in as her caregiver. Back then, I thought it was kindness, a husband taking care of his sick wife. a man doing the right thing. I did not understand that sometimes control dresses itself as compassion. I did not see how he positioned himself at the center of her world until she could not breathe without asking his permission. I was 19, old enough to sense something was wrong but too young to define it. After she passed, the house became his kingdom, and I became the territory he ruled. It started with the phone. He checked it every night, said he was making sure no scams targeted grieving young women. Then he began locking my clothes in the hallway closet. Said teenagers make impulsive choices during grief and he needed to supervise what I wore to school or work. The pills came next. He lined them up on the kitchen counter each morning. Multivitamins, hormone stabilizers, herbal boosters, liquid tinctures he brewed himself. Anything with a label he peeled off. Anything without one he said was homemade for purity. Every time I hesitated, he reminded me she trusted him with her entire life. So should I. The guilt was a chain around my throat, tightening every day. Then one afternoon, I collapsed on the floor of the living room, not fainting, collapsing. My legs just crumpled as if they no longer belonged to me. I remember his face hovering over me saying, "It was okay, it was okay, it was just my body adjusting." In the emergency room, they said, hormone imbalance, dehydration, stress. Earl latched onto that explanation like a man gripping a rope in a storm. "See," he said, "you do not take your health seriously. If your mother were here, she would be heartbroken." After that, he used those words to justify everything he did. He took over my diet. He replaced my shampoo with one he mixed himself. He inspected my skin for rashes and then applied creams that smelled like metal and pine oil. I tried to resist. Once I refused a drink he handed me and he slammed the glass so hard on the table that water splashed down my shirt. He immediately apologized, but the look in his eyes was not sorry. It was possessive. It was hungry for control. There were injections, too. He called them pain reducers. I did not want them, but he insisted they were gentle, natural, something he had learned working as a paramedic. He held my arm too tightly when he gave them, and afterward, I always felt lightheaded, detached, foggy around the edges. I knew something was wrong, but I had no proof. No medical record, no witness, nothing but suspicion and fear. And fear is quiet. It does not leave evidence. It only thumps inside your chest while the world around you insists everything is normal. I lasted 3 years under his grip. The day I turned 22, I looked at myself in the mirror and realized I no longer recognized the girl staring back. Pale, tired, jumping at every sound, asking permission to breathe. So, I left. I packed one duffel and walked out the door before dawn. I drove straight to the nearest recruiting office and enlisted. Not because it was my dream at the time, but because the Army had one thing Earl could never control: structure, rules, authority outside his reach. I thought joining the military would save me, and for a while it did. Basic training was brutal, but liberating because my pain finally had a legitimate source that was not mixed in a bottle by someone claiming to love me. I cut off every contact. New number, new address, new life. Or so I thought. Every now and then a letter arrived, always unsigned, but the handwriting was his. Sometimes he mailed vitamins, sometimes recipes. Once a small bottle of lotion. I threw them out each time, but the fear never entirely left. It lived under my ribs waiting, always waiting. Now, as I sat in the clinic staring at the laminate floor beneath my boots, I felt the past reaching out like a hand dragging me backward. Was this how long his influence stretched? Had he been slipping chemicals into my life even after I left? Had he found ways to reach me without physically being there? A soft knock at the door broke my spiral. Major Corbin re-entered holding a different folder this time. His expression had sharpened. "Captain Hale, something new came up in the chemical analysis. We found traces of a compound used years ago in certain paramedic kits before being discontinued." My pulse froze mid-beat. "The compound is uncommon," he continued. "Not something a civilian would access easily, but someone with old paramedic supplies might still have it." My throat tightened. "Sir, what kind of compound?" He met my eyes with a weight that made my stomach drop. The same type your stepfather would have had access to when he worked emergency medical services in Georgia. My vision narrowed. A cold rush went through me as if the room had dropped 20 degrees. Whatever this was, it was not new. It was not an accident. It was connected directly back to him, directly back to the house I fled. Before I could respond, the internal phone on the wall buzzed sharply. Major Corbin picked it up, listened, nodded, and then looked back at me. "Captain Hale," he said quietly. "We have additional results. I need you in the lab room now." Something in his tone told me the next revelation was going to be worse than everything I had already heard. The walk from the exam room to the small laboratory felt shorter than it should have. My boots thudded against the polished floor in steady measured beats, but inside my chest everything was pulsing out of rhythm. Major Corbin pushed open the door and motioned for me to sit. His movements were slow, deliberate, the way someone moves when they know the next words will cut deep. A large monitor glowed in the dim room, displaying magnified samples from my tests. Amber streaks, irregular clusters, fibrous strands. None of it looked like anything that belonged to a human body. He kept his eyes on the screen. "Captain Hale, I need you to listen carefully. What we found is not a typical hormone disruptor. It is not an infection, and it is not contamination. It is an engineered irritant." My breath hitched as he zoomed in further. "These compounds are designed to cause extended low-grade inflammation in human tissue. Not enough to disable you quickly, enough to degrade tissue over time, enough to destabilize your hormones, enough to cause chronic discomfort without triggering urgent medical alarms." I stared at the screen, unable to look away from the twisting shapes that seemed almost alive. "Sir, what exactly does that mean?" He tapped a gloved finger against a chart. "This compound is usually found in small quantities inside certain laboratory agents used by civilian researchers before 2016. It was banned after that year due to the risk of misuse. Misuse. The word echoed like metal. What kind of misuse? He faced me fully now, no attempt to soften the truth. This irritant was sometimes used by unethical caregivers to create dependency. Dependency. I froze. The idea hit like a cold slap. Someone could cause a patient to develop chronic inflammation so that patient would rely on that caregiver for treatment management or relief. The more the body struggled, the more the patient believed they needed that person. It was a method of control, subtle, devastating, and almost undetectable if applied in small doses. I felt the air thin around me as if the walls were closing in. So someone could deliberately introduce this into another person to make them sick. Yes, Captain. Sick, but not sick enough to die. Sick enough to depend. Sick enough to fear leaving. My blood turned cold. He continued. The delivery method can vary. It can be hidden in gel-based products like lotions, balms, or creams. It can also be placed inside soft gel capsules or dissolvable tablets, anything that can be absorbed slowly. My breath trembled. The lotion Earl sent, the vitamins, the gummies. My hands clenched against my knees. "Sir, are you saying this could have been given to me intentionally?" Corbin nodded grimly. "It is not only possible, it is likely. Repeating exposure over time creates the hormonal chaos we found in your system, and this type of compound does not appear in accidents. Someone had to mix it. Someone had to administer it more than once." My vision tightened at the edges like a slow-forming tunnel. I forced my voice steady. But that would mean someone had access to old paramedic supplies. Someone who knew how to handle chemical agents. Someone who knew how to use medical authority to manipulate another human being. He let the silence answer for him. Earl Maddox had been a paramedic for decades. He had kept outdated kits. He believed he understood medicine better than licensed doctors. He called himself her protector, her healer, her guide. A shiver went through me so strong I almost folded forward. Why would anyone do this to another person? He took a moment before speaking. "Control, Captain. It is always control. People like this create illness so they can present themselves as the solution. They build dependency so their victims feel unsafe without them. They damage you just enough so you look to them for healing. It is a psychological trap disguised as care." I felt my stomach twist remembering the glass vials on his dresser, the earthy metallic smell of his tinctures, The way he always insisted no doctor understood my body the way he did. The way he tightened his grip on my wrist when I tried to pull away from an injection. The way he said without me you would fall apart. My throat tightened. Sir, how long would something like this stay in my system? Years, he said quietly. Sometimes longer, depending on the dosage and the carrier. You may have been exposed more recently as well. The room seemed to tilt for a moment, and I blinked hard to steady myself. Why recently? Because new traces were found in your blood that do not match the old profile. They are fresher, within months, not years. Something cold crawled up my spine. Within months. 3 months ago, I opened the lotion. 2 months ago, I ate 2 gummies because I was tired after training. Both arrived in boxes with his handwriting. Both from a man I had not seen in 9 years but who never stopped reaching for me. My voice came out low. So this was not one moment. This was long-term. Ongoing. Sustained. He nodded. I believe you have been the target of extended tampering, perhaps for years. My breath left in a slow, shaking exhale. The truth settled over me like a heavy shadow finally taking shape. Earl had not let go. He had never stopped. Every package, every bottle, every harmless item had been a thread tying me back to him. A thread laced with poison. Before I could speak, the lab phone rang shrill and sharp. Corbin answered, listened, then turned toward me with a grimness that chilled my bones. Captain, the chemical signature we found today matches a discontinued compound once distributed to paramedics in Georgia, and we compared it with your old medical anomaly from 2014 again. It is an exact match. My heart stopped. One man had possession of that compound during that year. One man had controlled my medication. One man had been mixing things for me then and sending things to me still. Earl Maddox. And now this case was no longer medical confusion. It was intent. It was design. It was a long, quiet attack finally coming into the light. By the time I stepped out of the laboratory, the world outside felt sharper, louder, too bright for what was now unfolding inside my head. My boots hit the tile with mechanical precision, but my mind was still stuck on one name. One man. One shadow I thought I had outrun 9 years ago. I barely made it halfway down the corridor before 2 military police officers appeared at the end and motioned me over. Captain Hale, ma'am, you need to come with us. Their tone was neutral but firm, not optional, not casual, the kind of tone that means something has already escalated beyond your control. They escorted me into a small interview room inside Womack. 2 chairs, 1 stainless steel table. A wall vent humming faintly, slicing the silence into thin pieces. A woman waited inside, standing with her arms crossed. Dark suit, darker eyes. Hair pulled tightly back into a regulation bun, even though she was not in uniform. She radiated authority so quietly it felt like pressure in the air. Captain Sutton Hale, she said, identifying me before I could speak. I am Special Agent Jada Rowan, Criminal Investigation Division, CID. Her reputation reached most corners of Fort Liberty. Sharp, uncompromising. The kind of agent who did not chase ghosts unless she already had evidence they were real. I sat. She remained standing. That alone told me everything. This was not a courtesy conversation. This was an official investigation. Rowan opened a folder. Let's begin with the packages you have received in the past 12 months. My pulse jumped. I cleared my throat. Most of them came without a return address. Some I recognized by the handwriting, and who was the sender. I hesitated for only a fraction of a second. My stepfather, Earl Maddox. She did not blink. Did you ever open them? Yes. Did you ever ingest or apply anything that came from those packages? My jaw tightened. Yes, ma'am. Twice, maybe 3 times. She nodded slowly as if confirming something she already suspected. Tell me every item. I listed them. The gummies, the lotion, the small jar of balm, the immune booster drink mix I threw out immediately. Each word felt like another link in a chain tightening around my chest. She took notes with surgical precision, then raised her eyes. Who else has access to your barracks room? Only my roommate, Specialist Torres, and the cleaning staff during scheduled sweeps. Anyone else near your personal belongings recently? Not that I know of. But uncertainty crept into my voice. Did someone... Rowan exchanged a quick glance with one of the MPs. Then she placed a set of printed still frames on the table and slid them toward me. My stomach dropped. The images were from security cameras, grainy black and white, but unmistakable. A man standing near the supply drop-off area behind my barracks 2 nights ago. Hood pulled up, shoulders hunched, but the posture, the build, the way he stood slightly crooked on his right heel. My breath caught hard. It looked exactly like Earl. Rowan watched my reaction closely. We enhanced the footage, she said. The man's face was partially obscured, but the gait, the height, the shoulder slope all match your stepfather. I swallowed a sharp knot of panic. How would he even get on base? She tapped the table twice. That is what we are determining. 2 weeks ago, the visitor log flagged an attempted entry by someone presenting a contractor ID number that was invalid. The figure on the footage resembles that individual. My pulse thudded painfully in my ears. Earl had tried to get on post. Recently, boldly, with forged credentials. What was he planning to do? Room tampering, direct exposure, surveillance, or worse? Rowan leaned forward. Captain Hale, we also ran your stepfather's background. He was investigated in 2010 for unauthorized medical intervention involving a patient under his care. The room tilted. Unauthorized medical intervention. That phrase was just a sanitized way of saying he had meddled with someone else's body before. She continued. The case was inconclusive. No charges were filed, but the pattern is concerning. My hands tightened around the edge of the chair. Ma'am, I left that house 9 years ago. I changed everything. I do not understand how he could still reach me. Rowan's voice softened just slightly, but it did nothing to ease the cold knot in my stomach. People like this do not stop because their victims leave. They stop when they lose access, or when they are removed. Permanently. Her meaning was clear. If we did not stop him now, he would keep reaching for me until he succeeded in whatever sick plan he had mapped out. The interview stretched another 30 minutes. Detailed questions. Every item I touched. Every place I went. Every symptom I ignored. By the end, my head throbbed from the strain of holding myself steady. Rowan finally closed her folder. Captain, we are elevating this to a full CID investigation. Expect interviews, room searches, and increased surveillance. You may also receive a protective detail if we confirm he is physically on or near post. The words protective detail felt unreal, like I had been dragged into someone else's nightmare, but it was mine, and it had followed me across state spaces, years, and identities. As I left the CID office, the sun had barely dipped below the base housing rooftops. The air smelled of dew and burnt rubber from the motor pool. Ordinary sounds, ordinary smells. But the world no longer felt ordinary. I reached my barracks door exhausted down to my bones. I wanted sleep, silence, anything to make my mind stop spinning. But when I stepped closer, I froze. Something thin was sticking out from under the door. A white envelope, no postage, no markings. My pulse quickened with a dread so physical it felt like pressure against my ribs. I crouched, picked it up, and read the message scrawled in familiar tight handwriting. Do not be afraid. I will make you healthy again. My vision blurred. The floor felt unsteady. Earl had been here. At my door. At my room. While CID was still questioning me. And now this was no longer simply an investigation. This was a hunt, and I was the prey he believed still belonged to him. The envelope felt warm in my hand, even though the hallway air was cool. My fingers shook as I tore it open, already knowing deep in my gut what I would see. His handwriting, tight strokes, tilted slightly to the right. The same handwriting that used to appear on my high school permission slips on kitchen notes taped to the fridge on labels of bottles he claimed were vitamins your mother wanted you to take. I unfolded the paper slowly. The message inside was short, only 1 sentence, but it hit like a scalding brand pressed straight into my spine. Don't be afraid. I will make you healthy again. My breath stopped mid-chest. Healthy again. As if he had ever made me healthy. As if ruining my body gave him the right to claim he was fixing it. as if my life still existed under his authority. I stood there frozen in the hallway until Torres's door creaked open behind me. She peeked out, saw the envelope, and her expression shifted instantly. "Captain, are you okay?" I forced a nod. "I don't know yet." She stepped back, alarm widening her eyes, but to her credit, she didn't push. I waited until her door closed before turning back to my room. I slid the envelope inside my pocket like it was venom I didn't want to spill anywhere. The moment I stepped into my barracks room, I saw it. Another box, small, brown, unmarked, sitting neatly in the center of my bed like someone had placed it there with careful, deliberate hands. My stomach dropped. I approached slowly, each step heavier than the last. I didn't touch it. I used the sleeve of my uniform to tilt the lid open. Inside was a tiny jar wrapped in tissue paper, a pale yellow label. No brand, just handwriting. "The vitamins your mother saved for you." My vision flickered. My body wanted to recoil, but some darker instinct pulled me closer. I recognized the jar, the shape, the tinted glass. He used to keep identical ones lined up on a shelf above the stove. He called them supplements, but the smell always stung my nose, metallic and earthy, like chemicals trying to disguise themselves as herbs. I inhaled slowly through my teeth. Damn him. Damn him for using her name. Damn him for dragging my mother's memory into this sickness. I grabbed my phone, snapped photos of the jar and box, then backed away from the bed like the thing might explode. 10 minutes later, CID agents swept into my room. Gloves on, evidence bags out, calm voices masking urgency. One of them, a younger agent named Keating, unscrewed the jar carefully under a fume hood they set up near my desk. A faint vapor rose. He coughed once, blinked hard, then sealed the jar again. Agent Rowan arrived moments later. She didn't speak at first, she just looked at me. Really looked. There was no softness in her face, but there was understanding, cold, steady, unwavering. She lifted the jar. "Captain, did you open this?" "No, ma'am." "Good, because you don't want to know what would have happened if you had." Her tone was flat, but the meaning behind it made my knees unsteady. She signaled for Keating to bring over his preliminary test strip. The chemicals reacted instantly. The strip bloomed into a violent, rust-red color. Rowan exhaled sharply. "This compound is identical to the irritant found in your hormone panel." Identical. Not similar. Not approximate. Exact. My hands tightened into fists at my sides. He brought it onto the base. Into my room. Onto my bed. Rowan turned to me. "Captain, this is no longer simply tampering. This is targeted application. Someone wants to maintain exposure. Someone wants you inflamed, weakened, chemically dependent. Someone who believes," she paused, "someone who believes you are still under their care." The words drained every bit of heat from the room. I looked at the jar and felt something inside me crack in a way I hadn't felt in nearly a decade. Not anger, not fear. Something deeper, something older. I swallowed hard. When I spoke, my voice sounded like it was coming from far away. He used to say I was fragile, that without him I'd fall apart, that only he understood how to keep me well. Rowan's jaw tightened. That's not care, that's conditioning, and he's still doing it. The evidence team continued photographing every inch of the room, the box, the seal, the placement. The fingerprint dusting turned my bed sheets into a haze of gray powder. I sat on the edge of my desk chair, elbows on my knees, staring at the floor. My chest began to tighten, not from panic, but from a pressure that had been building for 9 years. Every breath felt like swallowing gravel. I tried to stay composed, tried to breathe like a soldier tried to focus on the facts, but the weight kept rising. Rowan's voice floated through the noise. "Captain, it's okay to react. You're safe right now." The word safe hit something raw. It was like a dam bursting without warning. My face tightened, my lungs shook, and then it happened, something I hadn't done since the night I left that house in Georgia. I broke. Tears hit my palms before I even registered I was crying. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, jagged, and devastating, the kind of cry you only have when your body stops fighting the truth. For 9 years, I had held myself together with pure will. 9 years of silence. 9 years of pretending the past couldn't touch me. But now it was in my blood, in my records, in my room in the jar, sitting inches from where I slept. And no amount of military discipline could keep it from collapsing me inward. Rowan didn't touch me. She just stood guard solid, unmoving, like a wall between me and the past, clawing its way back. When I finally managed to breathe again, she said quietly, "Captain Hale, this isn't your fault, but we are going to stop him." My tears dried slowly on my cheeks, leaving my skin tight and salty. I nodded, not because I believed it yet, but because for the first time, someone else knew. And for the first time, this nightmare was no longer mine alone. CID moved fast, and when CID moves fast, it feels like the walls of your life shift in real time, closing in around the truth you have been avoiding for years. By sunrise the next morning, Special Agent Jada Rowan had already locked down the logistics gate logs, pulled video from every camera within 300 yards of my barracks, and contacted both base security and the local sheriff's office in Cumberland County. I sat in the CID conference room wearing the same uniform from the night before, hands clasped so tightly my knuckles ached as Rowan began laying everything out on a whiteboard with the cold precision of a surgeon. The first layer of the reveal dropped like a stone. Earl did not stumble onto Fort Liberty by accident. He had posed as a civilian supply contractor using a falsified ID badge that mimicked the style used by the logistics vendor teams who deliver bulk goods to the DFAC and storage lots. Rowan circled the still image on the board. The scanner flagged the barcode as invalid. He walked away before the guard could question him further. My stomach twisted. He had tested the gate, tested the system, tested how close he could get. The second layer hit harder. Rowan slid a printout across the table, a red pickup truck. Dusty, ordinary looking, but the license plate was covered by a plastic shield that blocked camera reflectivity. This was the truck caught driving slowly behind the barracks row 2 nights earlier. The same truck seen near the supply drop area where he left items for me in the past. The same truck I remembered from Georgia when I was 22 and fleeing that house. Everything inside me went cold. Then Rowan delivered the third blow. We pulled records from the Georgia Department of Public Health. Your stepfather was written up in 2011 for an incident involving unauthorized possession of medical-grade irritants. He claimed he was using them for training demonstrations. He was fined but not charged. I felt my heart hammering so hard it made my vision pulse. Medical-grade irritants, the same family of compounds found inside my body, the same compound banned in 2016. The same compound now sitting inside an evidence jar pulled from my barracks bed. Rowan did not give me time to steady myself. Not yet. She pressed forward into the fourth layer like she was peeling back the final cover on a wound that had never healed. "We secured a federal warrant at 0500, she said. "We are searching his residence in Fayetteville right now." Fayetteville. He was not in Georgia. He was here, living only minutes from Fort Liberty, living near me, watching me. Waiting. I gripped the edges of my chair hard enough to feel the plastic bend. Another agent rushed in, handing Rowan a tablet. The moment she looked at the screen, her jaw hardened. She turned it toward me. "Captain, you need to see this." On the tablet was a live feed from the search team's body cameras inside Earl's house. The house was small, dimly lit, claustrophobic. But what shook me was not the house. It was the room. A room I had never seen before. A room hidden behind a panel of old drywall accessed only after the agents pried a loose board from the hallway. Inside was a table cluttered with medical supplies, syringes, gloves, IV tubing vials of chemicals labeled in his handwriting, some with dates ranging back more than a decade. Shelves lined with homemade balms and gels in the same jars he had sent me. A crate marked paramedic kit expired. A coil of tubing filled with a cloudy gel mixture still half liquid. The fifth layer cracked open. In the corner of the room, the agents found notebooks. Not random notes, not journals. Ledgers. Detailed logs. His handwriting again, each line pressed hard enough to imprint the page beneath. Rowan zoomed in. One entry read, "Sutton needs immune reinforcement. Another, her system destabilizes too easily, must help her regulate. Another, she grows independent when she feels strong, increased dosage. My throat tightened so violently I could hardly breathe. Independent. He wrote the word as if it were a sickness. Then the sixth layer landed like a punch to the chest. On the far wall was a corkboard. Pinned to it were old photographs of me. Some from high school, some from basic training graduation, and one from only 4 months ago taken near the commissary parking lot. My head snapped back. He took that picture here, at this base, while I was buying groceries. He had been close enough to see me, close enough to follow me, close enough to touch things I owned. I tasted metal in my mouth. Rowan watched me with steady eyes, but her voice carried a depth I had not heard before. Captain, this is not obsession. This is a sustained pattern of medical coercion and surveillance. He believes you belong under his care. He believes you are his responsibility, and he has been preparing to escalate. Another agent entered the room briskly. Ma'am, you need to see this. They handed Rowan a photograph taken inside Earl's hidden room. It was a small plastic tray containing 4 soft gel capsules partially melted. The analysis team had already run a field test. The same irritant compound from the jar in my room. The same compound from my hormone test. The same compound from 2014. My skull felt too tight for my brain. Rowan placed the photo gently in front of me. Captain Hale, this is not coincidence. This is not misfiling. This is not chance. This is deliberate long-term poisoning. I swallowed hard, but the air felt thick like syrup. My shoulders curled involuntarily, a protective reflex I had not done since I was 19. Then came the final layer, the one that made the room tilt and my stomach drop as if I had stepped off a cliff. One of the agents held up a piece of paper taken from inside the house. A calendar page. Old. Yellowed. Torn from a wall calendar dated April 2014. My breath froze. That was the month I collapsed in the living room back when I still lived with him. The same month I sent the blood test to an outside clinic. The same month I decided to run. On the calendar day, I fainted. He had written 2 words in red ink. Dose too strong. My fingers curled so tightly into my palms that my nails dug crescents into my skin. Rowan placed a firm but careful hand on the table, grounding the moment. Captain, this is the evidence we needed. This proves intent, pattern, history, planning, control. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, loud, uneven, like it was trying to punch its way out of my chest. The calendar image blurred as tears threatened again, but not the same tears as last night. These were hotter, angrier, sharper. My voice finally emerged hoarse and shaking. He documented it. He wrote it down. Rowan nodded once, slow and deliberate. Yes, Captain. He kept track of every time he harmed you. And now, we are going to bring him in. The room spun, then steadied, then spun again. The truth was no longer hiding. It was laid bare in ink and chemicals and photographs pinned to a wall inside a house only miles away. And for the first time in 9 years, the past was not just haunting me, it was hunting me. And now, CID was hunting it back. The human body has a strange way of warning you when the mind refuses to listen. Mine had been whispering for months, then speaking, then raising its voice, and now it felt like it had finally decided to scream. I woke up the morning after CID searched Earl's house feeling hollowed out as if something inside me had been scraped raw. My head pounded in sharp, rhythmic pulses. My skin felt hot, then cold, then hot again. My muscles twitched under my uniform like they were misfiring. But I still forced myself to go through the motions, tying my boots, buttoning my blouse, fastening my belt with hands that trembled just slightly. I told myself it was exhaustion. I told myself it was stress after everything Rowan revealed. I told myself anything except the truth rising steadily inside me like floodwater. Something was very wrong again. By the time I made it back to my barracks room after formation, a wave of dizziness hit so suddenly I had to grip the door frame to stay upright. The walls tilted. The floor felt like it shifted sideways. My vision pixelated, breaking into sharp squares of light. I blinked hard, trying to force the world back into shape, but my legs buckled. My shoulder slammed against the wall. My breath hitched as a burning rush tore through my chest. Torres heard the thud and burst from her room. "Captain! Captain! What's happening?" I tried to answer, but my tongue felt thick, sluggish, disconnected. A ringing sound filled my ears, growing louder, drowning out her voice. My hands went numb. My knees gave out completely. The last thing I saw was Torres dropping to her knees beside me, shouting for help as darkness poured in from all directions. When awareness snapped back, I wasn't in my barracks. I was staring up at the bright, sterile ceiling of Womack Army Medical Center, lights blurring into white halos. Voices echoed faintly around me. Paper rustling, machines beeping, footsteps moving quickly. My body felt heavy, too heavy to move, weighed down as if someone had laid sandbags across my chest. A nurse noticed my eyes flutter and called out, "Major Corbin, she's awake." He appeared beside me, face tight, eyes sharper than before. "Captain Hale, stay still. You collapsed in your barracks. Your roommate called it in quickly. You're stable now." My throat was dry like sand. I forced out a hoarse whisper. "What happened?" He exchanged a glance with another doctor, then leaned in. "We found something new in your blood work." My stomach twisted. "New?" He nodded grimly. "There are traces of a second compound layered on top of the irritant we already identified. A different agent, one not present in your system yesterday." My heart lurched. Meaning, this exposure is recent, as in within the last 24 hours. A cold wave passed through me so fast it made me shiver under the hospital blanket. 24 hours. The same period in which the envelope appeared under my door. The same period in which the unmarked box was placed on my bed. The same window of time in which someone who had been stalking me for years had proven he could get close enough to leave things inside my room. My pulse quickened and the monitor beside me spiked in response. Major Corbin raised a calming hand. "Captain, listen to me carefully. This new substance is not the same irritant. It is weaker diluted, possibly experimental, but it still has effects on hormone regulation and neurological balance. That would explain the collapse. The dizziness, the spasms. It might even be why you felt hot and cold this morning." My breathing accelerated. I turned my head slowly, fighting the weight pressing on my skull. "What does that mean?" "For the investigation." His expression darkened. "It means he made contact again. Recent contact, direct or indirect. CID believes something was introduced to your environment last night." The swelling dread inside me crystallized into a sharp point. Torres's voice from earlier flickered through my mind. "Captain, are you okay? Did you leave your room unlocked? Did someone come by?" My eyes widened slightly as memory twisted sharply. I had stepped out for 10 minutes to take a call from CID at the end of the hallway. 10 minutes. 10 minutes in which my door had been closed but not fully latched. 10 minutes in which someone could have slipped inside without making a sound. 10 minutes in which a man who had already breached the base once might have done it again. Corbin's voice lowered. "CID is treating this as attempted poisoning. Again. They've increased patrols near your barracks and locked down visitor access. You will be under medical observation until we stabilize your hormone levels." I felt my breath stutter. "Sir, is he still here, on base or nearby?" Corbin hesitated. Never a good sign. "We don't know, but the timing suggests proximity. Close proximity." My skin crawled with the feeling of unseen eyes, as though Earl was standing behind some invisible curtain watching this entire moment with twisted satisfaction. I forced myself to focus. What's the new substance? His jaw tightened. A derivative of a sedative compound used in outdated emergency kits. Weak but dangerous when combined with the irritant already in your body. It could cause fainting, disorientation, hormone surges, cardiac strain. My breath caught. "Could it have killed me?" He answered carefully but not gently. "Captain, if your roommate had not found you when she did, your condition could have become critical." The words slammed into me. Critical. He had not just wanted control. He had pushed further, harder, riskier. Had he meant to escalate, or had he miscalculated like he did in 2014 when he wrote "dose too strong" on the calendar? The thought made my stomach twist hard enough to ache. The door slid open and Agent Rowan strode in, her expression carved from stone. She took one look at my monitors, then turned to Corbin. How long was she unconscious? Approximately 6 minutes, he replied. Rowan nodded slowly, then faced me. Captain Hale, we found partial prints on the inside of your barracks door. Prints that don't belong to your roommate or any authorized personnel. My throat tightened so sharply I almost gagged. Prints. Inside my door, she continued. And the maintenance log shows no staff assigned to your hallway last night. I stared at Rowan, mind spinning. So he was there. He was inside. He was inches from where I slept. Her voice lowered into a chilling monotone. We have reason to believe your stepfather entered your barracks between 21:30 and 21:40. 10 minutes. 10 minutes when I was gone. 10 minutes when the hallway had been silent. 10 minutes when Earl Maddox had been close enough to touch my belongings, touch my uniform, touch me if he had wanted to. A shiver ripped through me so violently the blankets trembled. Rowan leaned closer. Captain, we are tightening security, but I need you to understand something clearly. Your stepfather is escalating. He's no longer satisfied with slow control. He is pushing for direct intervention. My chest constricted. My blood felt cold inside my veins. Direct intervention. In Earl's sick mind, that meant reclaiming me, fixing me, pulling me back under his authority. And now that CID was closing in, he was becoming reckless. My voice cracked as I whispered, "Why is he doing this?" Rowan's answer was blunt. Because losing control of you is the one thing he cannot tolerate, and now you are slipping beyond his reach. The monitor beside me beeped faster. My breaths turned shallow. Hormones scrambled inside my system like sparks in a live wire. Everything felt too tight, too sharp, too bright. And beneath all of it, one realization throbbed like a drumbeat. Earl was close. He had been inside my room. He was still out there. And he was not done. Not even close. The moment CID confirmed that Earl had stepped inside my barracks, the bass shifted into a different rhythm. A silent, tightened, predatory rhythm. The kind that tells you the hunt has officially begun. By late afternoon, Rowan and her team had already locked down the perimeter 2 miles around the barracks, rerouted foot patrols, placed MPs at the crossroads near the motor pool, and alerted the provost marshal's office. I watched it all unfold from my hospital bed at Womack monitors, beeping in slow, steady rhythm. My body still fogged by the chemical assault, but my mind razor sharp. Rowan paced at the foot of my bed, a tablet in her hand filled with camera footage. She tapped the screen. Captain, this is last night, timestamp 21:32. The footage flickered to life. A hallway camera outside my barracks. Empty. Quiet. Then, movement. A shadow passing across the frame. Slow. Deliberate. A man-shaped silhouette staying outside the camera's full angle, hugging the blind spot created by the ceiling beam. Then, another camera near the stairwell caught a clearer angle. A profile. A shoulder, a hand brushing lightly against the wall as if guiding himself in the dark. My breath stopped. It was him. Even in grainy footage, even in shadow, I knew the way he leaned forward slightly as he walked, the uneven rhythm of his steps, the way he tucked his chin when he wanted to stay unseen. Rowan zoomed in, sharpening the image. His right shoe leaves a drag pattern, same injury from his EMS accident in 2011. This confirms it. He was physically present inside your building. I gripped the blanket, pulse hammering through my ribs. Did he bring anything with him? Rowan's lips tightened. He carried a small bag, too small to be medical, too large to be empty. We believe it contained the capsule compound that caused your collapse. Another agent rushed into the room, breath slightly fast. Ma'am, we found something else. He handed Rowan a new still frame printed in black and white. It showed Earl's truck, red aging, dented in the front quarter panel driving past the base's south access road 3 hours before he entered my barracks. The license plate was again concealed behind the reflective shield. He was casing the area, mapping escape routes, checking patrol patterns. That was not a man acting impulsively. That was someone executing a plan. Rowan turned to Corbin. Doctor, How quickly would that compound affect her? He answered without hesitation. Within 1 to 3 hours of exposure. That was worse than I expected. He had timed it. He had known exactly when I would be vulnerable. Rowan straightened sharply. We need to find his location now. Pull traffic cameras up to Spring Lake and Yadkin. He's avoiding the main gate. He'll use civilian roads. The room snapped into controlled chaos as CID agents coordinated with local police pulling footage from gas stations, stoplights, and small convenience stores stretching along the outskirts of Fort Liberty. Rowan muttered to herself, scanning the map. He's not going home. He knows we searched it. He's not heading south. Too much state police presence. He's not staying near the base. Too risky. So where another agent burst in. We found the truck, abandoned. Rowan's head jerked up. Where mile marker 15 outside the West Training Range. My heart dropped. That area fed into dense woods, stretching toward the River Quiet, isolated, barely patrolled at night. Perfect for someone who wanted to hide. Or wait. Rowan snapped orders instantly. Lock down the West Quadrant. Call in canine and aerial drone support. Send 2 patrol teams to sweep the trailheads. Notify the ranger units on night rotation. She looked at me then. Captain, your stepfather is on foot, and he's carrying something. Something? Rowan's jaw tightened. A search kit, based on the outline in the footage. It could contain medical supplies, or chemical agents, or something worse. The possibility carved fear straight through me, but beneath it was another emotion, anger rising from a deeper well than I'd ever known. He was escalating. He was desperate. He was losing control. And desperate men do reckless, monstrous things when their delusions start cracking. The search began at dusk. The forest outside Fort Liberty darkened quickly, the trees forming a jagged silhouette against the fading sky. CID MPs and local deputies formed a wide arc moving methodically into the woods. Dogs barked, straining against leashes. Radios crackled. Flashlights sliced through the branches in thin white beams. Rowan stayed connected to all teams, her voice crisp over comms. Team Charlie report movement near Grid 37. Team Bravo check thermal pattern on the eastern ridge. Keep your spacing. He's unpredictable. Corbin stayed beside me at Womack, updating Rowan on my vitals as if he were tracking a soldier in the field. My hands trembled slightly. The sedative traces were leaving my body, but fear surged through in their place. Then a crackle in the radio. Team Alpha. We have movement. Rowan's voice sharpened. Identify. Negative. Lost visual. Movement between trees northbound. Possibly male. 60 to 70 feet ahead. Rowan hold perimeter. Do not engage alone. A moment of static, then a bark from one of the K9 units followed by rapid footsteps in the leaves. Team Bravo footprints located. Fresh. Male. Large stride. He's running. Rowan. Cut off the northern ridge. Don't let him reach the river. Use floodlights. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it over the radio. Minutes stretched into something suffocating. Then a shout. A scramble. Heavy breathing transmitted through someone's mic. Team Alpha, contact, suspect, spotted. He's moving fast. My breath locked. The radio howled with noise, branches snapping, boots pounding dirt, dogs barking, men shouting. Then one voice broke through loud, ragged shaking with fury and delusion. Earl! Even through the static, even distorted by distance, I recognized him instantly. She needs me. She's sick because she stopped listening. The words hit me like a steel rod to the chest. My lungs seized. The room felt smaller. Rowan froze mid-step, eyes locking on the radio. Earl's voice grew louder, closer to the receiver, shouting through the darkness of the woods. I only wanted her to come home. She belongs with me. She doesn't understand what's good for her. My blood turned to ice. This wasn't love. It wasn't care. It was obsession crystallized into something feral and dangerous. The forest erupted again with footsteps. Then another shout. Team Charlie suspect is cornered near the ravine. Repeat. Cornered Rowan's voice snapped like a whip. Hold him. Do not approach without backup. He may still have chemicals on him. The next sound was a struggle grunting branches breaking boots scraping against dirt. Then Earl's voice shrill and cracking under the weight of his unraveling mind. I only wanted her healthy. Everything I did was for her good. She's mine to keep safe. Something inside me broke, not with weakness but with a cold finality. This was who he truly was. This was the man who poisoned me, stalked me, controlled me, destroyed the last years of my mother's life, and tried to reclaim ownership of mine. Rowan leaned toward the speaker as if willing the forest to yield its final answer. A final scuffle, a bark, a shout. Then, Team Bravo suspect restrained. Repeat suspect in custody. My breath released in a tremble I didn't realize I'd been holding. Rowan exhaled once long and controlled. Then she looked at me, not with relief, but with the hard-set expression of someone who knows the battle may be over, but the war is only beginning. They wheeled me into the small CID observation room just after dawn, the kind with the two-way mirror and the steel table bolted into the floor. My body still ached from the collapse and the hormone crash, but my mind was steady sharpened by the night of terror that finally ended with Earl dragged out of the woods, screaming that he was the only one who could keep me alive. I sat with a blanket over my shoulders, IV port taped to my arm, and watched through the mirror as they brought him in. Earl Maddox, 62, weathered skin, gray beard, same worn jacket he used to wear when driving me to school. But something about him had changed. The mania was quieter now, contained, like he had realized the world no longer moved around him. He looked smaller in the interrogation chair than I had ever seen him. CID Agent Rowan stood beside me. "Captain Hale, we have no obligation to let him speak with you. Say the word, and I will shut it down." I took a slow breath. "No, ma'am. I want to hear what he thinks he has to say." Rowan gave a single sharp nod and stepped out. Moments later, she entered the interrogation room and announced in her clipped military tone, "Captain Hale has agreed to a monitored conversation. Any threat or attempt at manipulation will end this meeting immediately." Earl wiped his nose with the back of his hand and looked toward the mirror, knowing exactly where I was watching. The audacity of recognition in his eyes made my stomach twist. Then he spoke with a trembling voice that I remembered too well from my childhood, a voice he used whenever he wanted me to feel guilty for something that was not my fault. "Sutton Honey, baby girl. I never meant for things to get like this." Rowan stayed silent, letting him talk. He clasped his hands together, leaning forward as if he were confessing some tragic noble intention. "I was trying to help you. You do not understand how sick you have always been." I had to swallow back a surge of nausea. Sick. The word he always used to justify everything. He continued, tears streaking down his face, though none of them looked real. "When your mama died, you only had me, and you were so fragile. You fainted all the time. You did not eat enough. You were always in pain. Without me taking care of you, you would have slipped away." My jaw clenched, but I forced myself to keep listening. He lifted his head eyes wide with the familiar devotion that used to send ice through my spine. "I only wanted to keep you close, keep you safe, make sure you were strong. You never could have survived on your own, Sutton. You needed someone who understood your body better than you did." I felt something inside me break open, not from weakness, but from clarity. He actually believed this. The delusion was complete. Rowan asked Earl, "Did you administer substances to Captain Hale in the past year?" He looked horrified that she asked it so plainly. "Administer? How can you call it that? I gave her supplements, boosters, pain reducers, things she needed because she pushes herself too hard. She does not listen to her body. She never has. Every time she ignored my advice, she got worse." I leaned forward toward the glass, whispering, even though he could not hear me yet. "You made me worse." "That was the point." Rowan folded her arms. "You sent her packages containing substances that induced inflammation." Earl snapped. "Because she would not slow down? Because she was hurting herself? Because she joined that damn army instead of staying with family where she belonged?" His voice was rising, hand-slapping the table. "And every time she drifted, I had to pull her back. She always needed me. She always will. That was it." Rowan pressed the button allowing sound to travel into my observation room. Captain Hale wishes to speak. The door opened. A guard escorted me inside. The moment Earl saw me, his entire face lit with relief and twisted affection. "Sutton, sweetheart, you look tired. They should not be letting you walk around after what happened. Let me help you sit down." He reached for me. Rowan stepped between us like a shield. I never broke eye contact with him. I pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders and sat. Earl's hands trembled. "I can explain everything. You have to understand why I did what I did. You have always been such a fragile little thing. You think you are strong because you wear that uniform now, but I know the truth. Without proper care, without the right balance in your system, you fall apart." I leaned back slightly, letting his words expose exactly what he believed. "So that is why you kept interfering. Because you thought I could not take care of myself." He smiled, softly, tenderly, something twisted. "Exactly. You needed me. You always did. When you left that house, you were making the biggest mistake of your life. I had to make sure you stayed connected to me, that you did not drift into something dangerous." My voice came out colder than I expected. "Something dangerous." "Yes," Earl said earnestly. "The army, that life, those people, they push you, they break you, they take you away from your family, they poison your mind into thinking you do not need us. And then you stopped responding to my letters. You stopped calling. You cut me out. I had to step in." I blinked slowly. "You stepped in by poisoning me." He flinched as if the truth were offensive. "Poison. That is not poison. That is regulation. Correction. Rebalancing. You needed it. You always needed it. If I did not help your hormone function, you would be sick all the time. And look what happened. You collapsed because you ran from me. You always collapse when you run from me." Rowan's jaw flexed slightly, but she let me continue. I stared directly at the man who had orchestrated almost a decade of quiet medical destruction. "You think you helped me?" He nodded desperately. "Of course I did. Everything I did was for you. The vitamins, the boosters, the adjustments. You just never appreciated it, baby girl. You kept trying to be independent even though you are not built for independence. You belong with someone who knows how to control the things you cannot." The last word rang through me like a steel blade. Control, not protect, not love. Control, obsessive, consuming, delusional. And for the first time in my life, I saw the truth without distortion. He never wanted to protect me. He wanted to own me. I leaned forward until I could see the panic flicker behind his pupils. "You did not rebalance me. You did not protect me. You did not care for me. You poisoned me because you needed me sick enough to depend on you." His mouth opened. Shut. Opened again. Confusion warred with indignation. "That is not how it was. You needed me. You were weak. You were always weak." "No," I said quietly. "I was never weak. I was controlled." "There is a difference." Earl slammed his fist on the table, voice cracking with pure panic. "I am the only reason you are alive." Rowan stepped forward. "That is enough." But I held up my hand. "Let him talk." His voice broke. "I only wanted you to come home. You are mine." My stomach tightened. There it was, the truth finally spoken. Mine. I stood slowly, every movement deliberate, my voice steady, firm, final. "I am not yours. I never was. You tried to rewrite my body so you could rewrite my life. But you failed." His eyes went wild. "You cannot live without me, Sutton. You are too sick." And then I whispered the sentence he never expected to hear. "I am sick because of you. And that is why you no longer have any power over me." Rowan signaled to the guards. They stepped in and pulled him from the chair as he screamed my name in a desperate, unraveling wail. I watched without blinking, without shaking, without fear. For the first time in my life, the chain between us had snapped. The hearing room inside the county courthouse was colder than I expected, the kind of artificial cold that settles into your bones, even when the air outside is warm. Rows of spectators filled the benches, a mixture of military uniforms, retired veterans, spouses, medical staff from WOMAC, and civilians who had come because the case of a stepfather poisoning an army captain had become the talk of Fayetteville. Older women clutched tissues. Older men leaned forward with their elbows braced on their knees, jaws tight. The kind of audience that had lived long enough to recognize when something monstrous was hiding beneath the surface of a family story. CID Agent Rowan sat beside the prosecution table, flipping through her notes with steady hands. Across the room, Earl sat in a restraint chair, wrists secured but not painfully. He was dressed in county jail beige hair, flattened eyes darting from witness to witness like he was trying to decide which person to manipulate next. The military panel and civilian judge had been called in for a joint evidentiary presentation because my case crossed both jurisdictions. The moment the judge opened the session, the atmosphere shifted into something electric. The prosecution began with the foundation: photographs, medical reports, lab results. They displayed them one by one on a large screen. First slide the chemical breakdown of the compound found in my blood. Gasps ripple through the audience. Second slide the comparison of that compound to the banned irritant Earl had access to during his paramedic years. Someone whispered, "My God!" Third slide screenshots of the hormone irregularities over the past 6 months. A retired Army nurse in the front row shook her head with disbelief. The prosecutor continued. Next came the physical evidence seized from Earl's home. The room held its breath as they displayed images of the storage room. Shelves filled with outdated medical supplies, containers with handwritten labels, syringes that matched the brand discontinued a decade ago. Then the journal, a thick, weathered notebook with pages full of cramped handwriting. The prosecutor read aloud the most damning parts. She overexerts, needs correction. Her system weakens when she distances herself. Must keep her dependent. Several spectators recoiled. One elderly man whispered under his breath that the devil himself could not write something worse. Earl stared at the floor, expression half blank, half stubbornly righteous. In his mind, he was not a criminal. He was misunderstood. Then came the moment Rowan had prepared for. She stepped forward and addressed the judge with crisp authority. "With permission, we would like to present audio captured during the arrest outside the West Training Range." The judge nodded. The lights dimmed. The courtroom silenced. And then, through the speakers came Earl's voice, raw and unfiltered, yelling into the night. "She needs me. She is sick because she stopped listening. She belongs with me." A collective shudder passed through the room. The audio continued with the chaos of dogs barking, agents shouting, and Earl screaming that I would have collapsed sooner if I had not run from him. When the clip ended, the silence was suffocating. Even the judge looked shaken. Then the prosecution presented the timeline. Every collapse, every unexplained rash, every package, every indirect attempt to regain access to me. It was like watching my own life laid bare on a surgical table, but nothing compared to the moment they played the recording from the interrogation room. My own voice echoed through the speakers, quiet, steady, deadly calm. "You poisoned me because you needed me sick enough to depend on you." And then his reply, "Because you are weak without me." The audience burst into horrified murmurs until the judge called for order. Rowan leaned toward me. "Captain, it is time." My knees trembled as I stood, but not from fear. Something in me had been forged by the months of pain and the years of psychological suffocation. I walked to the stand. Every eye followed me, some with sympathy, some with dread, some with the quiet fury that older Americans feel when witnessing injustice that could have happened to their daughters, nieces, or younger selves. I swore in and took my seat. The prosecutor asked me to tell the panel everything, so I did. I began with my mother's illness. How Earl inserted himself as caretaker, how he monitored my food, my sleep, my clothing, my schedule, as if grief had given him the right to rebuild me into something he owned. I described the first collapse at 19, the visits to the ER, the unexplained labs, how Earl convinced me it was my own fault for being too frail for not listening to him. I watched the room stiffen when I explained how he gave injections without medical necessity, telling me they were for pain management, even though no doctor had ordered them. An older woman in the third row covered her mouth with trembling fingers. I told them about the day I left home at 22, how he called it betrayal, how he wrote letters claiming I would die without him. The audience winced when I described the packages, the vitamins, the lotions, everything he disguised as care. I saw heads nodding, especially among the older crowd who had lived long enough to recognize the shape of hidden cruelty. Then I explained the last 6 months, the pain, the exhaustion, the hormonal chaos, the collapse, how I blamed myself until the army doctor found the compound, how every symptom pointed not to a failing body, but a foreign hand forcing my body into failure. My throat tightened, but I kept speaking. For 10 years, he made me believe I was weak. For 10 years, he fed the story that without him, I could not function. For 10 years, he carved fear into my decisions so deeply that even when I cut ties, he still controlled me from a distance. I looked at the panel straight on, but the truth is, I was never sick. I was poisoned. A murmur of outrage swept the room. Someone whispered unbelievable. Another whispered monster. I continued with steady resolve. He always said I collapsed because I ignored him. But the truth is, I collapsed because he wanted ownership. He wanted a dependent, not a daughter. He wanted control, not family. He wanted a captive, not a child. When I finished, the courtroom was silent except for soft sobs. Older women wiped their cheeks. Veterans shook their heads with solemn anger. Even the judge paused longer than usual before thanking me. I walked back to my seat, trembling not from weakness, but from release. Across the room, Earl sat staring at me with a hollow expression, as if he did not understand why the world was no longer bending around his delusion. The truth had finally been dragged screaming into the light, and for the first time in my life, I was not the one who felt small. He was. The final day of the trial arrived with a thick sense of inevitability hanging in the air, as if the entire courthouse had been holding its breath for weeks and was finally ready to exhale. Outside the building, a crowd had gathered even before sunrise, lining the steps and walkway, with signs ranging from "Justice for Captain Hale" to "Stop Hidden Abuse." Veterans sat in folding chairs. Military spouses held coffees in gloved hands. Older women stood shoulder to shoulder, whispering to one another with that familiar mixture of outrage and protectiveness that only comes when a story mirrors the pain they have either lived through or feared all their lives. Inside the courtroom, the benches were filled long before the session began. WOMAC medical staff, CID agents, members of my unit, even a chaplain from Fort Liberty whom I barely knew sat quietly in the back row as if offering silent armor. Earl Maddox was brought in last, shackled, hollow-eyed, pale. The arrogance he once carried like a second skin had evaporated, leaving only a man stripped of the delusion that he could still control his narrative. He did not look at me. He stared straight ahead, jaw trembling slightly, as if he knew his words no longer had power over anyone. Judge Marla Hendricks, a woman in her late 50s with the calm storm presence of someone who had seen the darkest human behaviors without flinching, entered the courtroom. When she took her seat, every sound in the room died instantly. "This session is now in order," she nodded to the prosecution. "You may present your final statement." The prosecutor stepped forward, her voice clear, strong, and sharpened by weeks of painstaking evidence. "Ladies and gentlemen, the harm inflicted on Captain Sutton Hale is not the result of a single act of violence, but the result of a decade-long pattern of medical coercion, psychological manipulation, and intentional bodily harm." She recapped the evidence with surgical precision, starting with the chemical compounds found in my blood, the hormone-blocking agents, the lab results, the chemical irritants, the matching samples from Earl's storage room, and then the notebook entries about needing to keep me dependent. She showed the timeline again, highlighting each collapse, each flare of inflammation, each carefully disguised attempt to reinsert himself into my life. Then she played the interrogation audio one final time. Earl's voice echoed through the cavernous room. "She is weak without me. She belongs with me. If she listened, she would never be sick." The prosecutor let the silence stretch long enough for the disgust in the room to simmer. Earl Maddox did not care for her. He incapacitated her. He did not protect her. He tampered with her bodily autonomy. He did not love her. He sought dominance, control, and lifelong dependence. This is not caregiving. This is not paternal concern. This is coercive medical abuse, a crime that corrodes the soul and the spirit long before it reveals itself in the blood. She ended with a simple sentence. The law must acknowledge the full weight of what he has done and ensure that no one in this community ever believes such acts can be excused as misguided love. The defense attorney rose next, wearing a strained expression that betrayed the hopelessness of his position. He attempted to salvage what little argument he had left by framing Earl's actions as a tragic case of mental instability. He insisted that Earl did not intend harm, that he believed he was providing medical help. He invoked stress depression, unresolved grief from losing a spouse. But each excuse dissolved against the mountain of evidence. Judge Hendricks watched the defense impassively, her face unmoving as he repeated the same arguments that had already failed to sway the court. When he finished and took his seat, the room felt ready, heavy, waiting. Judge Hendricks folded her hands, slowly scanning the audience, then turning her gaze toward Earl. "Mr. Maddox, please rise." The bailiff helped him stand. He looked smaller than ever, a shadow of the man who once believed he could rewrite my entire biology to keep me under his thumb. Judge Hendricks began. "What we have witnessed over the course of this trial is not merely illegal conduct, but a systematic violation of bodily autonomy, trust, and personal liberty." She listed each charge clearly so that no one in the room could mistake the severity. Count 1, administering a harmful substance with intent to cause bodily injury. Count 2, coercive medical abuse. Count 3, stalking and unlawful surveillance. Count 4, possession of restricted medical agents. Count 5, aggravated battery by chemical interference. She paused, letting the words hang. Each of these offenses carries serious penalties on its own. Taken together, they represent a sustained assault on a young woman's health, freedom, and future. The room remained painfully still. Older viewers online would replay this moment again and again because it was the purest form of justice stripped of theatrics. I watched Earl's shoulders tighten, his breath shallow, uneven. Judge Hendricks continued. "You positioned yourself as protector while causing injury. You called yourself caregiver while inflicting harm. You claimed to love this woman while destroying her health to secure control. There is nothing noble, nothing compassionate, and nothing redeemable in your actions." After a long beat, she delivered the sentence. "Therefore, this court sentences you, Earl Robert Maddox, to 15 years in a maximum security state correctional facility with no eligibility for early release. You are permanently barred from any form of medical work, including volunteer positions. Furthermore, you are ordered to compensate Captain Sutton Hale for medical expenses, long-term treatment, and emotional damages in the amount of $300,000. And finally, a restraining order effective for the remainder of your life prohibits any form of contact, direct or indirect, with the victim. You will be transported immediately." The entire room released a breath as if the verdict had cracked open the air itself. A few people clapped softly without meaning to. Others bowed their heads in solemn recognition that justice, though slow, had arrived with force. Earl's reaction was not rage, not denial, but something stranger. Confusion. Genuine confusion. As if he could not comprehend why the world was no longer bending around his distorted version of care. They began to escort him out. Just before reaching the door, he turned slightly, his voice cracking with bewilderment. "Sutton, baby, why are you doing this? You need me. You always did." I looked at him for the last time, not with fear, not with grief, but with the calm certainty of someone who has survived a storm meant to drown her. I said nothing, because nothing I ever said had the power to free him from the delusion he built, and nothing he said could ever hold power over me again. As the door closed behind him, the room warmed as if winter had finally lifted. Rowan stepped to my side, her voice low. "It is over, Captain. You are officially recognized as a victim of coercive medical abuse by both military and civilian courts. You are cleared, released, safe." For the first time in years, the word safe meant something real. The verdict did more than convict Earl. It restored my name, my autonomy, my future. I sat down slowly, overwhelmed by the tidal wave of relief washing through me. Around me, the older spectators were crying, hugging each other, whispering, "That girl deserved justice." Thank God she got it. They were the ones who understood this story most intimately, because many of them had lived some version of this battle in their own quiet ways. As I stepped out of the courtroom into the bright North Carolina sun, a breeze lifted the edge of my uniform sleeve. For the first time in over a decade, the air felt like mine again. The weeks after the sentencing passed in a strange, slow motion, like I was moving through a world that was finally safe, yet still unfamiliar. Freedom after long-term control is not a sudden burst of joy, but a gradual unfreezing of parts of you that you did not realize had been numb for years. The first step toward reclaiming my body came in the form of an aggressive hormone restoration plan designed by the endocrine team at Womack Army Medical Center. They explained everything to me carefully, as if trying to return ownership of my decisions piece by piece. My levels were still chaotic. My system had been tampered with for so long that my natural rhythms struggled to reestablish themselves. The treatment included timed supplements, medication to reverse the inflammation, and weekly monitoring. For the first time, my body was receiving care without manipulation, and the difference felt profound. During the first appointment, the doctor, a calm woman named Lieutenant Colonel Reeves, paused after reading my chart and said quietly, "Captain Hale, your recovery is not just physical. There is a psychological journey you will have to walk through. Our job is to walk it with you." For the first time in years, I did not feel judged or doubted or dismissed. I felt supported. I felt seen. The side effects of the treatment were rough at first. Headaches, tremors on some mornings, a pressure in my joints when the medication kicked in. But unlike before, I knew the changes were not caused by someone trying to weaken me. They were part of healing, and that alone made me stronger. CID agent Jada Rowan visited often at first under the pretense of follow-up statements, but after a while it became clear she simply wanted to check in. She never pushed. She never pried. She would just sit across from me in the small recovery room talking about her day, her cases, the absurd things she had seen in the line of duty. Sometimes she talked about her daughter who had just started college and was complaining about dining hall food. One afternoon, as I was sitting with a heating pad across my stomach, she looked at me and said, "You know you do not have to be made of steel all the time." I let out a breath I did not realize I had been holding. "Is that what people think I am?" She shook her head. "No, that is what people like him tried to convince you to be. But strength is not silence. Strength is being able to stand back up after someone has tried to break you from the inside out." That was one of the first moments I allowed myself to feel something like softness since the trial. There were days when fear still crept in, especially after nightmares. I would jolt awake, convinced I smelled that chemical scent again, the one linked to the old gel jars Earl used to send. I would sit there breathing hard, staring at the walls of my barracks room, reminding myself he was gone, locked away, unable to reach me ever again. But trauma has a way of echoing long after the door has been shut. The Army Behavioral Health Program became the next stage of my healing. The counselor assigned to me, Major Erica Dalton, specialized in medical trauma and coercive control. During our first session, she asked me to describe the earliest moment I remembered feeling that something was wrong with Earl, but being unable to name it. The question cracked something open in me. I talked for nearly an hour without realizing time had passed. She listened without interruption, her posture calm, her eyes steady as if anchoring me back to the present each time a memory threatened to pull me into the past. She broke things down in a way no one ever had. You developed hypervigilance because your body learned it could be interfered with. You apologized excessively because you were conditioned to minimize your own needs. You pushed through pain because your system was taught that discomfort meant you were under his control. None of this is weakness, Captain. These are survival adaptations. Slowly, piece by piece, the shame I had carried for years began to fall away. This was not my fault. This was not something I invited. This was not something I should have recognized sooner. This was abuse hidden under the disguise of caregiving. Some nights after therapy, I walked the track outside the barracks, letting the cold air sting my face until my mind settled. Soldiers ran drills nearby. The sound of cadence calls grounded me, reminding me I belonged to a world where accountability existed, where rules protected the innocent, where justice was not just an idea, but a process I had survived. During one of my check-ins, Rowan asked if I wanted to get coffee off base. At first, I hesitated. I was used to keeping people at arm's length, but there was something about her presence, something steady that felt safe in a way I had not felt since my mother was alive. We went to a small cafe in Southern Pines. She ordered hot chocolate. I got black coffee. She laughed when I made a face at her drink. What she teased is a little sugar too much for a tough captain. I shook my head no, just unexpected. She leaned back in her chair, watching me for a moment before saying, "Unexpected is not always bad. Sutton, sometimes it is how life reminds you there is more waiting past the pain." For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to imagine a life that was not defined by fear or vigilance or looking over my shoulder. A life that was mine. Healing happened in strange layers. The first layer was physical. The second was emotional. The third was unwinding the invisible threads Earl had left behind, the ones that said I was fragile, or incapable, or dependent on someone else to understand my own body. One morning, a few weeks into treatment, I woke up and realized the heaviness in my limbs was gone. The feverish heat in my skin had faded. I stood in front of the mirror, touching my stomach, then my face, as if confirming I was real again. I whispered to my reflection, "You made it." Another afternoon on the track, I ran a mile without stopping. The wind whipped against my cheeks, and the sky opened wide above me. I felt weightless. Alive, free. The moment I crossed the finish line, I bent over my knees, breathing hard, laughing into the air. Someone from my unit shouted across the field, "Hey, Captain Hale, back at it." I nodded, breathless. Yeah, back at it. Even simple routines like folding my uniform or organizing my locker felt different. Each intentional act reminded me I had autonomy. I had choice. I had a future untouched by his hands. Rowan showed up again late one night after her shift, bringing 2 takeout bags and a grin. "You looked like you needed this," she said, handing me a burger. "Why? Did I look that bad today?" She shrugged. "Not bad, just tired. Healing is exhausting. You deserve fuel." We ate together sitting on the barracks steps watching soldiers return from late drills. The air was cool, the night quiet except for the distant hum of generators and the occasional radio chatter. I looked over at her. "Thank you." For what? For showing up. For not treating me like some fragile glass thing. She tapped her knuckles lightly against my shoulder. "Sutton, you were never fragile. You were injured. There is a difference." Those words lodged somewhere deep in my chest and stayed. Healing also meant accepting kindness without suspicion. It meant allowing support without feeling indebted. It meant trusting again slowly, carefully, but genuinely. By the end of the month, my blood work stabilized. My hormone levels edged into normal ranges. The inflammation markers dropped. Lieutenant Colonel Reeves smiled at my latest chart. "You are healing, Captain Hale." And not because someone else is directing your body for their own needs, but because you are choosing it. Those words felt like sunlight. As the weeks passed, I found myself sleeping longer, eating better, even laughing easier. The world no longer felt like a threat. It felt like possibility. One evening after therapy, I stood outside watching the sunset behind the longleaf pines painting the sky in gold. For the first time since I was 19, I felt something inside me settle. Not silence, not emptiness. Peace, real peace. The kind that grows only after walking through fire and coming out the other side. I whispered into the wind, "Mom, I am okay now, truly okay." And for the first time since she died, I knew it was true. In the weeks after the trial, my life shifted in ways I had never imagined possible. It was as if the world slowly widened around me, allowing pieces of my future to fall into place one careful inch at a time. I had gone so long without imagining anything beyond survival that planning for a life of my own felt almost luxurious. The Army moved quickly to acknowledge my role in the investigation. During a formation on a crisp March morning, my battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Jennings, called me forward. I stood at attention, feeling the familiar hum of soldiers around me, boots aligned in perfect rows, breath escaping in synchronized white clouds. "Captain Sutton Hale, front and center," he said. I marched up, bracing for the usual formality, but the moment he spoke, I felt my throat tighten. Over the last several months, Captain Hale demonstrated extraordinary composure, cooperation, and courage during an unprecedented criminal investigation directly impacting military security and personnel safety. Her actions were instrumental in the apprehension, prosecution, and conviction of a dangerous offender. He paused, letting the weight of the words settle. "For exemplary conduct and steadfast professionalism, you are hereby awarded the Army Commendation Medal." The medal was pinned to my uniform, the metal cold against my chest. Soldiers behind me murmured approval. Low, respectful, a sound that settled into my bones. For the first time in years, I stood before my peers without the shadow of fear or secrecy. I stood as myself. A few days later, Jennings called me into his office. At first, I assumed it was follow-up paperwork or medical updates. But when I sat down, he closed the door and leaned back in his chair, studying me with the expression of someone making a calculated decision. "Captain Hale, how long have you been with Alpha Company?" I thought for a second about how much life had passed since I arrived. "Almost 5 years, sir." He nodded. "And in that time, you have shown not only tactical competency, but exceptional leadership even when your personal circumstances became challenging." He folded his hands. "The company executive officer position opens next month. The brigade commander and I agree you should be considered for it." My breath caught. The XO position was not a small responsibility. It was the second highest position in the company, responsible for operations, administration, logistics, and supporting the commander in every mission. "Sir, are you sure?" He raised an eyebrow. "Captain, you have carried yourself with more professionalism under extreme conditions than some officers manage in a full career." "Yes, I am sure." Something eased inside me. Not pride exactly, but validation. For years, I had worked to prove myself without ever revealing the battle I was fighting behind the scenes. And now the Army saw me clearly. The path forward was mine again. With my health improving and my promotion on the horizon, I allowed myself to consider something I had long avoided. A home, not barracks, not temporary lodging. A real home. Southern Pines had always been my quiet refuge during off-duty weekends. The town was calm, full of pine trees, antique shops, and porch lights that glowed soft yellow at dusk. One afternoon after therapy, I drove there with no particular destination. The longleaf pines swayed overhead as I pulled into a little neighborhood near the edges of Weymouth Woods. A for sale sign stood in front of a small brick condo with white shutters and a front porch just large enough for a chair and a hanging fern. I sat in my car staring at it longer than I meant to. The idea of owning something felt dangerous and hopeful at once. Earl had taken so much of my autonomy that the thought of claiming a place of my own felt like rewriting a piece of history. I contacted the realtor just to ask for details, but within 2 weeks, I found myself signing papers in a quiet office in downtown Southern Pines. When the realtor slid the keys toward me, I hesitated a moment, my fingers hovering above them as if touching them would break some unspoken rule. Then I closed my hand around the metal and felt a subtle warmth move up my arm. The condo was small, but perfect. 2 bedrooms, a modest kitchen, a living room with sunlight that poured through the windows every morning as if reminding me daily that new beginnings were possible. The first night I slept on the floor with only a borrowed blanket from a friend in my unit. I lay there listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of settling wood, the distant sound of someone walking their dog outside. For the first time in my adult life, the silence did not feel threatening. It felt earned. The next morning, I opened all the windows, letting fresh spring air fill the condo. I set my uniform jacket on the back of a chair and stood barefoot on the hardwood, thinking, this is mine. No one else controls this space. No one else dictates what happens to me here. Mine. When I returned to base that afternoon, Rowan found me in the motor pool going over maintenance reports. She leaned against the Humvee with a grin. "Heard you bought a place," she said. I blinked. "How in the world did you hear that already?" She tapped her phone. "Please, I know everything." Also, your realtor posted a picture online with the caption, "Congratulations to Captain Hale on her new home." I groaned but laughed despite myself. Rowan nudged my arm. "I am proud of you, Sutton. Seriously, that is a big step." I nodded. It felt like time. She smiled softly. It was past time. Word about the XO recommendation spread through the unit faster than I expected. Soldiers I had supervised or trained over the years came up to me offering handshakes and quiet congratulations. The respect in their eyes felt different now, not because of what happened to me, but because of how I walked through it. A few older NCOs in their 50s and 60s clapped me on the shoulder, saying things like, "Hell of a fight, Captain," and "You did your mother proud." Those were the comments that struck deepest. One afternoon, Jennings called me back to his office. He handed me a sealed envelope with the battalion crest. I opened it slowly, reading the first line. "Captain Sutton Hale, you are hereby selected to serve as Company Executive Officer, Alpha Company, 16th Sustainment Brigade, effective May 1st. My hands trembled slightly, not from nerves, but from the sheer magnitude of the moment. After everything, after the years of hidden struggle, after the chemical interference, after the courtroom, I had climbed back to a position of leadership. The Army had trusted me with a role that required clarity, strength, and resilience, and I finally had all three. Moving into my condo became its own ritual of healing. I bought a second-hand couch, repainted the bedroom walls a soft, warm gray, and hung the Army Commendation Medal above my small desk. I placed one framed photo of my mother on the hallway table next to a candle. She looked peaceful in that picture, smiling softly at something beyond the camera. Every morning before leaving for PT, I touched the corner of the frame lightly. "I am okay now, Mom. I promise." On the first night in my fully set-up home, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, listening to the crickets. A few neighbors waved as they walked by. The world felt normal, grounded, entirely mine. I closed my eyes and let the cool night air brush against my face. My career was moving forward. My body was healing. My home was safe. And for the first time, the past was something behind me, not something dragging at my heels. I whispered into the quiet night, "I am free." For the first time, those words felt true all the way down to my bones. Driving back to Georgia felt like traveling into a chapter of my life I had never fully closed, a chapter frozen in time, one I had avoided for more than a decade. The interstate stretched endlessly beneath the deep blue sky, and with each passing mile, the pine trees thickened, and the air warmed in a way that smelled faintly of red clay and summer storms. I had not set foot near my childhood town since the year I left home at 22, running from a house that had stopped feeling like a home long before my mother even passed. Now I was returning not as the girl who fled, but as a 31-year-old Army captain with scars healed, strength reclaimed, and a future that belonged to me. As I crossed the state line, a heaviness settled in my chest, not fear exactly, but a quiet awareness that I was touching old wounds with steady hands. The closer I drove, the more the landscape pulled memories to the surface. The bend in the road where my mother once taught me how to drive. The old corner store where she bought peach sodas on hot evenings. The long stretch of highway where I sat in the passenger seat years ago watching her fight through pain she never wanted me to see. By the time I reached the driveway of my childhood home, the sun had begun to dip, turning the sky soft orange. The house looked smaller than I remembered, weathered, quiet. The yard overgrown, the porch paint peeling, the mailbox leaning as if exhausted from years of neglect. It no longer had the presence of a place where fear lived. It simply looked like a house long abandoned by meaning. I stood for a moment at the bottom of the steps, letting the silence settle around me. No footsteps behind me. No chemical scent lingering in the air. No voice calling me weak or dependent. Just stillness. I unlocked the front door. The hinges groaned. Dust floated in the warm light spilling through the windows. The living room smelled faintly of old wood and forgotten summers. My mother's framed prints still hung crooked on the walls. Earl's recliner was gone, a stark square of lighter carpet, the only evidence it had once existed. I walked slowly through the rooms, touching surfaces with the caution of someone handling fragile relics. My mother's sewing box sat untouched on a shelf. A chipped mug she used every morning still rested beside the sink. Her handwriting on an old grocery list clung to the refrigerator door edges curling with age. The memories pressed into me gently, not suffocating like before, but bittersweet warm like shadows of love that once lived here. In her bedroom, the sunlight fell across her quilted bedspread in soft golden stripes, and for a moment it felt like she might walk in humming as she used to. I sat on the edge of the bed, letting my fingers trace the stitching she made by hand. "Mom," I whispered, "I am okay now. I promise." Tears pricked my eyes, but not from pain. From release. From truth. From survival. I spent hours sorting through her belongings, deciding what should travel home with me and what could finally rest. A scarf that still held the faintest trace of her perfume. A photograph of us at Tybee Island, laughing hair tangled by the wind. A stack of letters she had written during her treatments, full of hope, even when her body failed her. In the back of her closet, I found a small wooden box, one I had not seen since I was a child. Inside were birthday cards, pressed flowers, and a folded sheet of paper with my name written in her soft, looping handwriting. My breath caught. The letter was dated 2 weeks before she died. I unfolded it, careful not to tear the delicate paper. Her words felt like warm hands cupping my face. "Sutton, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer there to protect you, but I need you to know something. You are stronger than you think. You always have been. Do not let anyone tell you who you are or what you can be. Your life is yours. Live it freely. Choose it bravely." I pressed the letter to my chest and let the tears fall silently. It was as if she had written it for this exact moment 12 years later, guiding me across the last bridge of grief I had not yet crossed. As evening settled, I finally walked into the room I had avoided the longest, the small office Earl once used. The air felt colder here, though the house was warm. Files were gone, shelves empty, but in the middle of the desk lay something that stopped me cold. A letter addressed to me in Earl's handwriting, stiff, sharp strokes that once made my stomach twist with dread. I recognized it instantly. It was the last letter he tried to give me, the one CID had collected as evidence. The one that began with a claim he had repeated for years. "You belong to me." I picked it up slowly, the paper thin and brittle as if it had aged decades in just a few years. Reading the first line made my skin crawl even now, but this time I felt no fear. Only clarity. Only certainty. Only the profound awareness that nothing written on this page had power over me anymore. I took the letter outside, into the backyard where my mother and I used to plant marigolds every spring. The grass brushed lightly against my ankles as I knelt, placing the letter on a small patch of bare earth. I struck a match, my fingers steady. The flame caught quickly, curling the edges of the page into blackened ash. I watched the words that once haunted me disintegrate into nothingness, rising into the twilight air, like smoke, releasing the last remnants of him from my life. When the fire faded, I touched the ground where the ashes settled and whispered a final goodbye. Not to him, to the girl I used to be, the fearful girl, the uncertain girl, the girl living under someone else's version of reality. She was gone. In her place stood a woman who had battled the invisible enemy inside her own body and won. As darkness spread across the sky, I sat on the back steps, breathing in the scent of earth and summer wind. For the first time in 12 years, I felt light, untethered, whole. Peace did not arrive in a dramatic wave. It arrived quietly, settling into the spaces where hurt once lived, like warm sunlight filling an empty room. When I finally stood to leave, I looked back at the house one last time. It no longer felt like a place of ghosts. It felt like a chapter I had finished reading, a story I had survived. I locked the door gently, placed the key on the porch railing, and walked toward my car. The night air wrapped around me, carrying the soft hum of cicadas and distant highway noise. As I drove away, the rearview mirror showed the house shrinking until it disappeared completely, swallowed by the trees and the dark. And for the first time since I was 19, I felt a quiet settling inside my chest, so pure and steady, it felt like the earth itself exhaled with me. I whispered into the empty car, "I am free, Mom, truly free." And this time, the freedom felt permanent. I have replayed the last 12 years of my life in my head more times than I can count, And each time, the images shift slightly like pieces of film catching new light. Some memories soften, some sharpen, some lose their shape entirely. But one truth remains steady no matter how often I revisit it. I survived something I never should have had to survive. And if you are listening to this part of my story, I want to talk to you directly, not as a soldier or a patient or a victim, but as a human being who has walked through darkness and finally stepped into the sun. There is something no one told me when I was younger, something I wish my mother had lived long enough to say. Your body is yours. No matter who raised you, no matter who claims they love you, no matter who insists they know what is best, your body is yours. And no one ever has the right to interfere with it, threaten it, manipulate it, or claim ownership of it in any disguised form. I did not understand that for a long time. When control is disguised as care, it becomes a difficult truth to untangle. At 19, I believed Earl when he said I was fragile. At 22, I believed I needed to push through pain to prove him wrong. At 31, I finally learned the truth. Pain is not weakness. Pain is information. Pain is your body speaking, and ignoring it is not strength. It is survival. A survival you do not owe anyone. If you are someone who learned to minimize discomfort because someone convinced you that your suffering made you easier to control, let me say this clearly. You deserve better. You deserve safety. You deserve to listen to your own signals without guilt. In the months after the trial, I spent hours sitting alone on my new porch in Southern Pines, watching the way the sunlight filtered through the branches. Some mornings I held a cup of tea, letting the steam warm my face while birds chirped in the pines. Some evenings I sat in silence, letting the wind move gently through the leaves. Those quiet hours taught me something important. Peace has a weight to it, a soft, steady weight that feels almost unfamiliar when you have lived so long waiting for the next blow, the next crisis, the next manipulation disguised as affection. For a long time, I did not trust the quiet. It felt like the moment before a storm. But slowly I learned that sometimes silence is not a warning. Sometimes silence is safety. Sometimes silence is the gift you fought for. I know many of you watching this grew up in homes where you were told to stay silent. I know many of you were raised by people who used fear or guilt or obligation as tools. I know some of you had to unlearn lies about your worth, about your strength, about what you deserved. And if no one has acknowledged your journey, let me be the first to say it. I see you, I understand you, and your story matters. When I first joined the Army, I believed discipline would fix everything. If I followed orders, did the work excelled in every task, then the ghosts of my past would simply fall away. But trauma does not evaporate with effort. Trauma lingers until you are ready to turn around and face it. And healing does not happen in a single moment. Healing happens in a series of decisions. The decision to seek help. The decision to trust someone again. The decision to believe your own experience even when someone tries to rewrite it. The decision to let go of a past that tried to claim you. One of the biggest lessons I learned is that peace has a price. A real price. You have to confront what hurt you. You have to accept that some people will never give you the apology you deserve, and you have to choose your future even when your past screams louder. But that price is worth paying every time. When I stood in the Georgia backyard and burned that last letter, the one where Earl wrote that I belonged to him, it felt like breaking the last chain I never realized was still attached. Watching the paper turn to ash, I understood something. I never belonged to him. I never belonged to fear. I never belonged to illness. I never belonged to silence. I belonged to myself, and I always had. If you grew up in a home where love was conditional, where affection came with strings, where you were told you were weak or unworthy or helpless without someone else guiding you, let me tell you the truth. You are not weak. You are not broken. You are not hard to love. You were controlled. You were manipulated. You were shaped by someone who benefited from your doubt. And the fact that you are here listening to this means you survived long enough to begin unlearning all of it. I want to talk for a moment about signals, the ones we ignore, because we have been conditioned to push through them. the tiredness that never went away, the headaches I brushed off, the burning sensation I believed was stress, the stomach pains I blamed on training. All of those symptoms were my body trying to speak to me, but for years I had been taught not to listen. If you have signals like that in your life, do not dismiss them. Do not chalk them up to age or stress or exhaustion. Listen to your body. It has been fighting for you longer than anyone else. Healing also meant reaching out even when it terrified me. People like Rowan and Major Dalton reminded me that trust does not have to be blind. Trust can be cautious, earned, slow, but it must exist if you want to feel whole again. One of the biggest steps I took was allowing myself to be cared for without feeling guilty, without worrying that someone would take advantage, without assuming the worst. That alone changed my life. Now, when I walk into my condo in Southern Pines, I feel something I never felt in that Georgia house: safety, ownership, peace. My mother's photo sits on my hallway table, and every time I pass it, I remember her words. Your life is yours. Live it freely. Choose it bravely. It took me 12 years to understand what she meant. It took a trial, imprisonment, healing, and rebuilding, but I finally live by those words. If you are listening to this and carrying your own hidden story, I want you to know one last thing. You do not heal by pretending nothing happened. You heal by accepting what did happen and choosing not to let it define what comes next. Strength is not silence. Strength is truth. Strength is choosing yourself even when it feels impossible. Peace is not given. Peace is fought for, and it is worth every battle, every scar, every moment of doubt. I am living proof of that, and if I can reach this place of calm after everything, then so can you. Wherever you are watching from, whatever your story has been, whatever weight you carry, I hope you choose your own freedom, your own healing, your own life, because it belongs to you, only you. Before I end this story, I want to talk to you, the person sitting on the other side of the screen right now. Whether you are watching from a living room in Texas, a porch in Florida, a kitchen table in Ohio, or a quiet bedroom in Oregon, unable to sleep because something about this story stirred a memory you thought you had buried. I want to know where you are hearing my voice from. I want to know what part of the country is awake with me tonight. Tell me the city you are in. Tell me what time it is right now. Whether it is early morning or late evening or the quiet, strange hours between midnight and dawn, I want to see how this community stretches across the map. Every pin on that map tells me something powerful. It tells me you are here, you are listening, you are part of a circle much bigger than one story. So right now, before you forget, drop a comment with your city and your local time. I read them all one by one. It reminds me that healing does not happen in isolation. It happens in community, even a virtual one built by strangers who understand fear, resilience, and survival in ways that words cannot fully capture. If you felt anything during my journey, even for a moment, if you recognized pieces of yourself in the shadows I walked through, I want you to know you are not alone. There are thousands of people on this channel, men and women, many over 50, who have lived quiet battles for decades. You are part of that family now. The reason I share my story is not for shock or spectacle, but because someone out there needs to hear that survival is possible. Someone needs to hear that peace can be found after chaos. Someone needs to hear that no matter what you lived through, your story is not finished yet. And if this story moved you, or held your attention, or made you feel something in your chest, even for a minute, then I want to ask you for one small thing. Hit the like button. It tells the platform that stories about justice, healing, and survival matter and deserve to reach more people like you. It also helps someone who might be scrolling in silence find this video at the exact moment they need it. And if you want to walk this journey with me, if you want more stories about courage and truth and triumph, if you want narratives that uplift you even while they break your heart, then I would be honored if you subscribed to the channel. This community is built on honesty, strength, and the quiet defiance of people who refuse to let darkness steal their future. Subscribing is not just supporting me, it is supporting every survivor who finds courage here. And if you have been with me through the entire series of this story, from the first shocking discovery in the exam room, to the investigation, to the courtroom, to the healing, and to this moment of peace, then I want to say thank you. Truly. I know these stories are not easy to listen to. They stir things inside us we sometimes try to forget. But facing truth, even through someone else's experience, is part of healing too. If you want to continue this journey, I have something for you. There is another story waiting, one that touches on many of the same themes, but in a completely different way. It is about a Navy medic who returned home from deployment only to find a betrayal so deep it reshaped everything she believed about loyalty. It is about a family secret buried for 20 years. And it is about a moment in a courtroom that left everyone in stunned silence. If you want to see how justice unfolds in that story, click the next video after this one. You will know it when you see it. A thumbnail with a single line that hits like a punch. Her commander saw the bruises and whispered, "I know who did this." If this story resonated with you, that one will take you even deeper. And before you go, I want to leave you with something personal, something I carried through every chapter of my life after escaping Earl's control. Peace is not passive. Peace is not quiet resignation. Peace is earned. Peace is fought for. Peace is a decision you make every day to choose your own life over someone else's version of it. Even if the world told you for years that your voice did not matter, I am telling you right now, it does. The world is quieter when your voice is missing. Your story adds weight. Your survival adds meaning. Your presence adds strength to the rest of us walking our own paths. So wherever you are watching from tonight, whatever time it is, whatever pain you have lived through or are still living through, take this with you. You deserve safety. You deserve freedom. You deserve peace. And you deserve a life that belongs to you. If my story showed you anything, I hope it showed you that it is never too late to reclaim what was taken. Never too late to speak your truth. Never too late to fight for the ending you deserve. And I hope you stay with me for the next story, because healing does not happen in one chapter. It happens over many, and I would be honored to walk through each one with you. Now tell me where you are watching from. Tell me what time it is. Tell me where in America this story found you tonight. I am listening, and I am grateful you are here.